lot of detail. So I'll just briefly outline what the project is. The creation of a factory that manufactures solar water units, and the name of the factory is Eureka's Future, in the Latrobe Valley. And the idea is that it would be the first of many factories that are owned and controlled by the people. And listening to John talk, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, there are so many different ways of framing what we're doing. Down in the valley, there was a very strong, they would argue, very rich grouper tradition. For you younger ones, the groupers were the National Civic Council, the DLP, largely Catholic based. My father was an early supporter of that tradition. Imagine the discussions around the table. He became a leftist before he died, I might add. And they love what we want to do in the valley. They really love it because there's a rich Catholic tradition called the distributionist tradition that talked about cooperatives. And in fact, if you look at some of the founding documents, in fact, the Big Red Book Fair, I found a book here one year, was written by, I think it was 25 people who founded that National Civic Council and groupers and so on and so forth. And cooperatives were big on their agenda. And so when they talk about it, you know, they like us would talk about Mondragon in the Basque territories near Spain, which I think it was 1942. A priest, I think he was a Jesuit. If not, he should have been. Obviously, didn't get on well with Franco, and he was exiled, and he was exiled to the Basque countries, and they had absolutely nothing. And by 1956, they'd cooperativized the little they did have, and the second large co-op they ever put in place was a cooperative bank, credit union, and in turn, that was able to finance or fund the setting up of many other and indeed wealth-creating cooperatives, manufacturing cooperatives. But they also now have world-class cooperative schools, universities, etc. They've set up industries in other countries, and for a while there was a big debate because the workers weren't anywhere near, in the countries where they were setting up secondarily, weren't anywhere near at the rates of livelihood that they were in Mondragon. And just recently, up at the Search Foundation conference, I attended a workshop by Race Matthews, who reported that there were massive discussions going on, and in fact, Mondragon has now said everywhere we set up a factory or have anything to do with the establishment of that factory, the workers must be, equal to the workers in Mondragon. That came out of the Catholic distributionist tradition. It didn't come out of our socialist tradition. It certainly would have linked to socialist and libertarian traditions in Spain. I've no doubt that link was there. But I raise it to say that that there is a historic left outside of the labels and the internecine warfare that, looking around the room, certainly I engaged in it lustily when I was younger. And outside of all of that, there is a historic left. It's that group of people who can't oppose connectivity, interconnection, as distinct from separation. It's that group of people, be they in the religious traditions or social and political humanist traditions like ourselves generally, can't oppose compassion to a discompassionate way of living. Yeah? So, and that historic left has struggled with the forms. How do we do it? We in the left here, we spent a lot of time in the 20th century looking at what are the appropriate vehicles. How do we bring about change that's not merely on about freedom, but on about equality. And how do we get that balance right? Now, I guess if you look across the historic left traditions, one of the conclusions we were forced to reach out of our experience and our practice of the 20th century was that that change, it had to be in the hands of the people. That there was nothing inherent in the notion of planning an economy. I mean, I'm down in the Latrobe Valley at the moment. You ever wanted an example of a planned economy? What's the State Electricity Commission of Victoria, the SECV? You bought your house through the SECV. You bought your washing machine through the SECV. They built schools, they built town. They built the town of your lawn. You know, which just prior to privatisation they bulldozed for obvious ideological reasons. But I mean, it was a planned economy. And you talk to workers down there, including the grippers, they loved it. But if you put to them, you know, you actually grew up in a planned economy, get away, you know, I'm the communist. But, you know what I mean, outside of the labels, there was life. And that lived life has created an experience down there that, so when we talk about social enterprise, we've had a rush of support. People have just rushed into the media, they ring up, they ask about how they can, where is this factory? I want to get a job there, you know. Like, we're not ready yet, but you know, we will be and we want your support. So I guess I spent so much time talking about that because I think it's important that we open all the doors and windows on this and not bog it down in our particular lineage language, our concept base, our mental constructs. I mean, I would talk about it from a Marxist perspective. That'd be easier for me than a Catholic distributionist tradition. Right? Marxist, okay. Marx talked about change from feudalism to capitalism. That change happened when feudalism became dependent upon capitalists. The feudal rulers became dependent. Capitalists started producing things. The feudal aristocracy became dependent on it because they couldn't produce that stuff. That's not what they did. That's not what feudalism was about. That was the revolution. And then around that new economy, that massive economy that capitalists established, they set the political forms, the parliaments, the representative democracy. And then they had bloody wars, revolutionary wars defending that. But the change came first. Why do I say that? Because we've got that now. 75% of all the investment capital in Australia is worker superannuation. The change has happened. That is post-capitalist, comrades. It's just that none of our political forms, none of our means of ownership, the social relations, reflect that fact. And so the big question for us, for all of us, regardless of lineage or tradition, is what do we put in place in order to say, well, all right, if in fact people like Twiggy Forrest and the Minerals Council are a fiction, that is, most of the monies they're playing around with is our money. So it's not any longer just a case of they create their wealth through the labour of the working class. The wealth is actually ours. 75% of that capital invested is ours. So, looked at from a Marxist perspective, you see the same, you reach the same conclusions, but we describe it and define it differently. All right, so the real living thing that we're trying to do. Well, we've been in negotiation with two small capitalist companies for around about 10 years now. It started with the setting up of Earthworker here at Trades Hall, and the idea of Earthworker was to bring together the Green and the Labour movements to look at the outcomes that the Green movement wanted to pursue, and look at how could we as the organised labour movement bring those about. And we said that there are no jobs on a dead planet, and we said that it is jobs and environment, not jobs versus environment. 10 years ago, that was a fairly meaty debate to enter into. And we won the debate. Around about 12 unions started to affiliate. We then got bogged down in the timber industry dispute because we were asked to mediate, and that killed it without going into a long story. So what we did was we got rid of all the t-shirts and the badges. I knew they'd come in handy one day. I've got a few for you in the bag. And we said, well, all right, what are the outcomes we want to achieve? Well, we wanted to achieve this outcome of the jobs and environment. And what we were saying